Hey Ella, I've been thinking about stepping up my English practice. Have you ever tried practicing with language exchange partners online?
Hey, Emma. Yeah, I've actually been doing that for a while now. It's been really helpful for improving my speaking and listening skills. Are you considering it?
I am, but I'm really sure where to start. How does it work? Do you just chat with people or is it more structured?
It can be both, depending on what you're looking for. The basic idea is that you find someone who's a native speaker of the language you're learning, English, in your case, and who wants to learn your language. Then you take turns practicing. Sometimes it's casual chatting, and other times you can focus on specific topics or grammar.
That sounds interesting. I like the idea of it being a two-way street where both people are learning. How do you find partners? Are there specific platforms or apps you use?
There are a few good ones out there. I've had the most luck with apps like HelloTalk and Tandem. They are designed specifically for language exchange, so you can easily find people who match your language goals. You can search by language, proficiency level, and even interests, which helps in finding someone you'll actually enjoy talking to.
I've heard of Hello Talk, but I've never used it. Do you usually text or do you do voice or video calls as well?
I started with texting because it was less intimidating, but I quickly moved on to voice and video calls. Speaking is where you really start to improve. Texting is great for learning vocabulary and sentence structure, but you need that real-time conversation to get used to thinking and responding quickly in English.
That makes sense. I'd probably start with texting too, just to get comfortable. Do you schedule regular sessions with your language partners or is it more spontaneous?
It depends on the person. Some people like to have a regular schedule, like once or twice a week at a specific time. Others prefer to keep it casual and chat whenever both of you are online. I've done both, and they each have their benefits. A regular schedule can help with consistency, but spontaneous chats can feel more natural and less like a chore.
I like the idea of both options. It sounds flexible, which is great. What do you usually talk about with your partners?
We talk about all sorts of things, our daily lives, hobbies, current events, or even specific language questions. Sometimes we'll choose a topic beforehand, especially if one of us is trying to practice certain vocabulary or grammar. Other times, we just chat and see where the conversation goes. The key is to keep it engaging and not too formal.
That sounds like a good balance. Do you ever feel awkward or nervous when you're speaking in English, especially at the beginning?
Definitely. At first, it was a bit nerve-wracking because I didn't want to make mistakes or sound silly. But most language exchange partners are really understanding and supportive. They are also learners, so they get it. Plus, the more you practice, the less nervous you become. It starts to feel more natural over time.
That's reassuring. I think that's one of the things holding me back. I worry about making mistakes, but I guess that's part of the learning process, right?
Exactly. Making mistakes is how you learn. And honestly, your language partner is probably making mistakes too, so it's all part of the experience. The important thing is to keep trying and not get discouraged.
I'll keep that in mind. How long have you been doing language exchanges? And have you noticed a big difference in your English skills?
I've been doing it for about a year now, and it's made a huge difference. My confidence in speaking has improved a lot, and I've picked up a ton of new vocabulary and expressions that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. Plus, I've made some really good friends along the way.
That's awesome. It sounds like a great way to learn, not just because you're practicing the language, but also because you're connecting with people from different cultures.
Definitely. That's one of the best parts. You get to learn about other cultures, perspectives, and ways of life. It makes the learning process much more interesting and meaningful. And because you're building friendships, you're more motivated to keep practicing.
I love that. I've been looking for a way to make my English practice more engaging, and this sounds perfect. Do you have any tips for getting started?
Sure. Start by creating a profile on one of the language exchange apps. Be clear about what you're looking for and what languages you speak. Then, take the initiative to reach out to people. Don't wait for them to come to you. It might take a few tries to find someone you click with, but don't get discouraged. Also, set some goals for yourself, like practicing speaking for at least 15 minutes a day or learning a certain number of new phrases each week.
That's great advice. I think setting goals will help me stay focused, and I'll definitely be proactive about reaching out to people. I'm excited to get started.
You should be. It's a really rewarding experience. And remember, it's okay to take it slow at first. Just enjoy the process and watch your skills grow.
Thanks, Ella. You've given me the push I needed. I'm going to sign up tonight and see how it goes. I'll let you know how it turns out.
I'm glad I could help, Emma. You're going to do great. And if you ever want to practice with me or need any advice along the way, just let me know.
Thanks, Ella. So, once you started doing language exchanges, did you stick with the same partners? Or did you switch it up and talk to different people?
A bit of both, actually. I have a few regular partners that I've been talking to for months, but I also like to mix it up and chat with new people now and then. Each person brings something different to the conversation, so it's good to have a variety. Some people are great for casual conversations, while others might help you with specific grammar points or pronunciation.
That makes sense. I guess talking to different people would expose you to various accents and speaking styles too, right?
Exactly. It's one of the best parts. You get used to different accents, which is really helpful because in real life, you'll encounter a range of them. It also keeps things interesting. Every conversation is a bit different.
I hadn't thought of that, but it's true. It's probably good practice for real world situations. Did you ever have a partner where it just didn't work out? Like maybe the conversation didn't flow well?
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Not everyone you connect with will be a perfect match, and that's okay. Some conversations might feel a bit forced, or you might not have much in common. If that happens, don't feel bad about moving on and finding someone else. It's important to find partners you're comfortable with and who motivate you to keep practicing.
That's good to know. I guess I'll need to be patient and not get discouraged if the first few people aren't a perfect fit.
Exactly. It's a bit like dating in that way, you need to find the right chemistry. But when you do find the right partners, it's really rewarding. And even the conversations that don't go perfectly still help you learn something.
True, I'm definitely going to keep an open mind. How long did it take you to feel comfortable having conversations in English?
It took a few months of regular practice before I really started to feel comfortable. At first, I was hesitant and overthinking everything I said, but over time, I started to relax and just focus on the conversation instead of worrying about mistakes. The more I practiced, the more natural it felt.
That's encouraging. I know I'll probably feel awkward at first, but I'm hoping that with practice, it'll get easier.
It definitely will. The key is consistency. Even if you can only spare 10 or 15 minutes a day, that adds up over time. And before you know it, you'll be chatting away without even thinking about it.
I'm really looking forward to that point. Did you ever do any specific exercises with your language partners, like role playing or discussing specific topics?
Yeah, sometimes we do role playing, like pretending to order food at a restaurant or having a job interview. It's a fun way to practice specific scenarios and get more comfortable with everyday situations. We also did some topic-based discussions where we'd pick a subject ahead of time and talk about it in depth. It helps to prepare a bit so you can use new vocabulary and practice specific grammar points.
That sounds really useful. I think I'd like to try that too, especially the role playing. It seems like it would help with fluency in real life situations.
It definitely does. Plus, it's a great way to break the ice if you're feeling a bit shy. Role playing can make the conversation feel more structured, so you're not just trying to think of things to say on the spot.
I keep that in mind. I think having a plan for the conversation might help me feel less nervous. Do you ever review your conversation afterward? Like go over any mistakes you made or new words you learned?
Absolutely. I always try to take a few minutes after each conversation to reflect on what went well and what I could improve. I write down any new words or phrases I learned, and if I made mistakes, I try to understand why. It's a good way to reinforce what you've learned and make sure you're improving over time.
That's a great habit. I'll definitely try to do that too. It seems like a good way to track your progress and stay motivated.
It really helps. You'll start to see patterns in your mistakes, and over time, you'll notice that you're making fewer of them. Plus, it's satisfying to look back and see how far you've come.
I can imagine. I'm feeling much more confident about starting now. Thanks so much for sharing all this with me, Hella. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, Emma. I'm glad I could help. You're going to do great. I can't wait to hear about your progress. Just remember to enjoy the process and don't be too hard on yourself.
So, Ella, what about the time zones? Have you ever had trouble finding a good time to chat with your language partners, especially if they're on the other side of the world?
Yeah, time zones can be a bit tricky, especially when your partner is in a completely different part of the world, but it's usually manageable if both of you are flexible. Sometimes I'll chat early in the morning or late at night to accommodate the other person's schedule, and they do the same for me. We usually try to find a time that works for both of us, even if it means adjusting our regular routines a bit.
I see. I guess it just requires some coordination. Have you ever had to stop practicing with a partner because of time zone issues?
A couple of times, yeah. If our schedules were just too different, we'd end up not being able to find a good time to chat regularly, and eventually, we'd agree to move on. It's a bit disappointing, but it's part of the process. Luckily, there are always other people to connect with who might be in a more compatible time zone.
That's true. It's good to know that there are plenty of options out there. Have you ever made friends with your language partners? Like staying in touch even outside of your language practice sessions?
Definitely. I've made a few really good friends through language exchanges. Some of them I still talk to regularly, even if we're not actively doing language practice anymore. It's cool because we've been able to learn about each other's cultures and lives over time, not just the language. It feels more like a real friendship than just a language exchange.
That's awesome. I think it would be great to form those kinds of connections. It sounds like it would make the learning process more meaningful and enjoyable.
It really does. When you're friends with your language partner, it feels less like studying and more like just having a conversation with a buddy. Plus, it's a great way to stay motivated because you're looking forward to the chat, not just the practice.
I can see how that would make a big difference. Do you find that your conversations with friends who are language partners are more informal, or do you still focus on language goals?
It's a mix. With friends, the conversations tend to be more informal and relaxed, but we still focus on language goals from time to time. Sometimes we'll have a session where we help each other with specific language issues, and other times we just chat casually. It's nice to have that flexibility, and because we know each other well, it's easier to give and receive feedback.
That sounds like a good balance. I'm really looking forward to building those kinds of connections. Do you ever practice with multiple people at the same time, like in group chats or calls?
Occasionally, I've joined group chats or video calls, especially in language learning communities where a bunch of people get together to practice. It's a different experience because you're interacting with multiple people at once, which can be a bit challenging but also really rewarding. You get to hear different accents and perspectives, and it's a good way to practice thinking on your feet in a conversation.
That sounds like it would be a lot of fun, but maybe a bit overwhelming at first. Did you find it hard to keep up in those group settings?
At first, yes, it's definitely more fast paced, and you have to stay on your toes. But it's great for improving your listening skills and getting used to the natural flow of conversation. Plus, you can learn a lot from hearing how others express themselves and how they handle different situations in the conversation. If you're up for a challenge, I'd say give it a try once you're comfortable with one on one exchanges.
I'll definitely consider that. It sounds like it would be good preparation for real world situations where you're talking with multiple people. I think I'll focus on one conversations first, but it's nice to know that group practice is an option down the road.
That sounds like a good plan. Start with what you're comfortable with, and then branch out as you gain confidence. There's no rush, you'll get there step by step.
Thanks, Ella. I feel a lot more confident about diving into this now. I'll start with the apps you mentioned and see where it takes me. Who knows, maybe I'll end up making some lifelong friends along the way.
I'm sure you will, Emma. Just take it one day at a time, and remember to enjoy the process. Language learning is a journey, not a race. And if you ever need advice or just want to chat about how it's going, you know where to find me.
Thanks, Ella. You've been really helpful. I'll keep you updated on my progress, and maybe we can do a practice session together soon.
I'd love that. Can't wait to hear all about your experiences. Good luck, Emma. You're going to do great.